And why not? They're looking forward to an important date, dinner at home with the family.
When grocery stores were a luxury and money was scarce, farm families had 30 tried-and-true dinners that could feed anyone who showed up at the table.
As far as these boys are concerned, well, hamburgers and hot dogs are...
These weren't just meals. They were masterpieces of resourcefulness that turned simple ingredients into feasts that satisfied the hungriest field workers. These forgotten farmer dinners tell the story of American ingenuity in the kitchen. Each recipe represents generations of knowledge about making something extraordinary from what the land provided. Let's rediscover these incredible meals that built our country. The Threshing Crew's ultimate feast. Picture 15 hungry men walking in from the fields at noon. Dust on their clothes and sweat on their faces. They expected a meal that could fuel them through the afternoon of backbreaking work. Farm wives knew exactly what to serve. The Threshing Crew's ultimate feast started with a massive pot roast, surrounded by every root vegetable from the cellar. This wasn't just dinner. This was a calculated strategy to feed the hardest working crew in the county without breaking the family budget. Carrots, potatoes, turnips, and onions all cooked together in one enormous roasting pan. The beauty was that this meal could stretch to feed anyone who showed up. An extra worker meant another scoop of vegetables, not panic in the kitchen. The secret was starting before dawn and letting everything slow cook while the morning chores got done. Sunday's golden promise. Sunday meant one thing on the farm. The best chicken in the yard was about to become dinner. Farm families didn't just fry chicken. They created a complete ritual around selecting, preparing, and serving their prized birds. The chosen hen met her fate Saturday evening, giving the meat time to rest before Sunday's grand preparation. The milk gravy, made in the same skillet, captured every bit of crispy goodness left behind. Those brown bits, stuck to the bottom of the cast-iron pan, held the secret to gravy that could make grown men weep with satisfaction. This wasn't convenience food. It was a weekly celebration that required planning, skill, and perfect timing. The lard had to reach exactly the right temperature. Too cool and the chicken absorbed grease. Too hot and the outside burned before the inside cooked through. Children learned to pluck feathers while mothers heated the lard to that crucial temperature. Young hands worked alongside experienced ones, learning techniques that would feed their own families someday. The gravy technique alone separated good cooks from great ones, using fresh milk from the morning milking. The cream that had risen overnight made the gravy rich and golden, nothing like the thin store-bought substitutes that came later. Churn day's double reward. Making butter was exhausting work, but smart farm wives turned churn day into something special. The cream separator had done its job, leaving thick cream ready for the long process of churning into golden butter. While the cream turned to butter in that wooden churn, chicken simmered on the stove and fresh egg noodles rolled out on the kitchen table. 3 separate tasks happening at once, each requiring perfect timing to come together at dinner time. The real genius was serving it all over mashed potatoes, creating the ultimate comfort food combination. This wasn't just a meal, it was engineering designed to use every bit of dairy richness the farm could produce in one satisfying dinner. Fresh buttermilk from the churn, cream from the separator, and eggs from the henhouse all came together. The buttermilk that remained after churning became part of the noodle dough. The cream went into the mashed potatoes. Nothing got wasted on churn day. Rolling noodles by hand was an art that mothers taught daughters on churn days. The dough had to be rolled thin enough to cook quickly, but thick enough to hold up under the weight of chicken and gravy. When the pig became dinner, butchering day meant the entire farm community came together for one of the year's most important events. The blue enamel roaster came out for special occasions, and fresh pork with scalloped potatoes was the celebration meal that honored everyone's hard work. That distinctive blue roaster could hold enough food to feed a dozen hungry helpers who had spent hours processing the pig. Nothing could be wasted when a family invested months raising a pig for the table. Every scrap of meat found its purpose, and the choicest cuts went straight into the roaster with layers of thinly sliced potatoes from the root cellar. Layer after layer of sliced potatoes and fresh pork created a dish that could feed the neighbors who helped with butchering. The potatoes absorbed the rich pork drippings while the meat stayed tender and juicy, creating flavors that made the hard work worthwhile. The cream sauce binding everything together came from the farm's own dairy cows. That morning's milk provided the base for a sauce that turned simple ingredients into something worthy of the community feast. This meal represented months of planning, from raising the pig to growing the potatoes to timing the butchering perfectly. The oat bin secret. When meat was scarce, farm wives discovered that oats could transform a small amount of ground beef into a feast. A pound of hamburger that might feed 3 people suddenly stretched to satisfy 8 hungry mouths when mixed with ground oats from the feed bin. This wasn't just meatloaf. It was engineering designed to feed a large family with whatever protein they could afford. The oats absorbed moisture and expanded, creating bulk that made expensive meat go twice as far without anyone feeling cheated. The ketchup glaze on top made it look like a special occasion meal, even when money was tight. That shiny red coating transformed humble ingredients into something that looked like it belonged on a restaurant table. The sweet, tangy flavor masked any hint that this was stretcher food. Ground oats from the feed bin stretched the meat while adding nutrition and substance. Farm wives ran whole oats through their hand-crank grinders, creating a coarse meal that bound with the beef like magic. The oats added fiber and vitamins that store-bought breadcrumbs couldn't provide. Farm families ate this during lean times, but remembered it fondly, because it never felt like deprivation. Children asked for seconds and thirds, never suspecting they were eating Depression-era survival food. The secret was mixing the oats with milk and eggs to create a texture that fooled everyone. The milk softened the oats, while the eggs bound everything into a loaf that sliced clean and held together perfectly. Pounding out tough times. Round steak was cheap because it was tough, but farm wives knew exactly how to transform it into something tender. The butcher sold this cut for half the price of better steaks because most people couldn't figure out how to make it edible. The meat mallet came out first, pounding the steak until it submitted to their will. Those wooden mallets with the textured heads broke down the tough fibers that made round steak chewy. Farm wives pounded with rhythm and purpose, flattening the meat until it doubled in size. Flour, tomatoes, and onions created a gravy that could make shoe leather taste good. The flour coating caught the drippings during browning, creating the base for a sauce that would simmer for hours. Canned tomatoes from the previous summer's harvest added acidity that helped break down stubborn meat fibers. This technique turned the cheapest cut of beef into a meal that satisfied the hungriest farm workers. What started as tough, stringy meat became fork-tender perfection that fell apart at the touch of a knife. Swiss steak required patience, slow cooking for hours, while other chores got done around the farm. The low heat and long cooking time transformed tough connective tissue into rich, silky texture. The tomato-onion gravy was the real star, rich enough to make everyone forget they were eating budget meat. That sauce captured all the concentrated flavors from browning and slow cooking, creating something that tasted expensive. Farm wives took pride in their ability to make tough cuts, tender through skill and determination. This dish proved that technique mattered more than expensive ingredients when feeding a family. The Hayfield Hero. When hay season arrived, farm wives needed meals that could simmer unattended while everyone worked the fields. The timing was always unpredictable. Weather could change in an hour, and crews might work until sunset or come in early when equipment broke down. The Nesco roaster became the hero of harvest time. Slow-cooking goulash that would be ready whenever the crew came in. That electric roaster sat on the kitchen counter like a faithful servant, maintaining perfect temperature without any supervision from the cook. Ground beef, noodles, and vegetables all cooked together in one pot that could feed a dozen people. onions, tomatoes, and whatever vegetables were ready in the garden joined the beef and egg noodles in that reliable roaster. The result fed hungry workers without requiring constant attention from farm wives who had their own field work to manage. This wasn't fancy cooking, it was strategic meal planning for the busiest time of year. Every ingredient had to earn its place by being hearty, filling, and capable of long cooking without turning to mush. The best part was that it actually improved the longer it cooked. Perfect for unpredictable farm schedules. The flavors melded together over hours of gentle heat, creating something richer than any quick meal could achieve. Farm wives could start it at dawn, and no dinner would be perfect, whether the crew returned at noon or sunset. August's garden treasure. Late summer meant cabbage heads the size of basketballs growing in the garden and rows of glass jars filled with tomato sauce from the previous year's canning. August was the perfect time to combine this year's fresh cabbage harvest with last summer's preserved tomatoes. Rolling cabbage leaves around seasoned rice and meat created individual packages of comfort that could feed the whole family. Each leaf had to be blanched in boiling water until it was pliable, but not mushy, then carefully wrapped around a mixture of ground meat, rice, and onions. The tomato sauce came from jars preserved the summer before, connecting this year's harvest to last year's abundance. Opening those jars released the concentrated flavor of summer tomatoes that had been captured at their peak and stored in the cellar through winter and spring. This dish required patience and skill. Each roll had to be perfect, each leaf blanched just right. Too long in the boiling water and the leaves fell apart. Too short, and they cracked when rolled. Farm wives developed the timing through years of practice. Farm wives made dozens at once, knowing that cabbage rolls improved with time and reheating. The flavors melded together overnight, making day-old cabbage rolls even more satisfying than fresh ones. Children learned to help with the rolling, turning meal preparation into family tradition. Small hands were perfect for spreading the filling and rolling the leaves tight enough to hold together during cooking. August cabbage rolls celebrated both the current harvest and the foresight of previous seasons, proving that good planning created year-round abundance from simple ingredients. The old hen's final glory. When laying hens stopped producing eggs, they got one last chance to feed the family with dignity. These old birds had served faithfully for years, providing breakfast eggs and baby chicks. Now their tough meat would become the foundation for one of the most satisfying meals on the farm. The pressure cooker transformed tough old birds into tender meat that fell off the bone. That whistling pot worked magic that regular boiling could never achieve. The steam pressure broke down the stubborn connective tissue that made old hens chewy, turning them into silky, flavorful meat. Drop dumplings made from simple flour and water stretched the meal to feed everyone at the table. Farm wives mixed basic flour with just enough water to form a thick batter, then dropped spoonfuls directly into the bubbling broth. Breakfast's evening victory. Sometimes the best dinner was actually breakfast served when the sun went down. Farm families discovered this truth during the busiest seasons when traditional cooking took too much time and energy after 16-hour workdays. Biscuits and sausage gravy represented comfort food at its most fundamental level. The combination delivered everything a tired body needed: carbohydrates for energy, protein for strength, and fat for satisfaction. No fancy ingredients required, just flour, milk, and meat from the farm's own production. Farm families discovered that breakfast foods could satisfy dinner hunger just as well as traditional meals. The beauty was in the simplicity. Hot biscuits split open and smothered in rich, peppery gravy that stuck to hungry ribs better than most elaborate dinners. The key was making everything from scratch. Biscuits that were fluffy, gravy that was rich and peppery. Farm wives used fresh milk from the evening milking and sausage they had made and smoked themselves. Every element connected directly to the land that supported the family. This meal cost almost nothing but delivered maximum satisfaction after long days of physical work. New Year's Lucky Feast. January 1st meant pork and sauerkraut, a tradition that promised prosperity for the coming year. Farm families woke up on New Year's Day knowing exactly what would grace their dinner table that evening. The crock of kraut had been fermenting since autumn, developing the perfect tangy bite through months of patient waiting. That wooden crock sat in the cool cellar, transforming fresh cabbage into something sharp and complex that could cut through the richness of winter pork. Buttered potatoes provided the mild backdrop that let the bold flavors of pork and kraut shine. Those simple boiled potatoes, mashed with fresh butter from the churn, created the perfect neutral canvas for the intense combination of salty pork and sour cabbage. This wasn't just a meal, it was a ritual that connected farm families to their German and Eastern European roots. Immigrant families brought this tradition across the ocean, believing that eating pork on New Year's Day would bring wealth because pigs root forward, never backward. The combination was supposed to bring good luck, but it definitely brought satisfaction on cold winter days. The rich pork fat warmed bellies, while the tangy kraut provided vitamins that fresh vegetables couldn't supply in the middle of winter. Farm wives planned this meal months in advance, timing the kraut fermentation perfectly. Making kraut in late summer meant it would be ready for New Year's dinner after months of slow transformation in the cellar. Every family had their own variation, but the core combination never changed: pork, kraut, and potatoes. New Year's dinner represented hope, tradition, and the promise that preserved foods would carry families through winter.